What you're witnessing is the beginning of one of aviation's most perplexing mysteries. A modern aircraft, an experienced crew, and a sudden, terrifying plunge into the unknown. This is the story of Air France Flight 447 on May 31, 2009. Around 8 p.m. local time, Air France Flight 447 left Rio de Janeiro International Airport, Brazil, headed for Paris, France. The flight route took the aircraft over the vast Atlantic Ocean, crossing into European airspace before reaching its final destination. The journey usually takes around 12 hours. The aircraft was an Airbus A330, one of the newest in Air France's fleet. It had undergone a major overhaul just weeks earlier in April 2009 and had around 19,000 flying hours at the time of the incident. Powered by two General Electric CF6 engines, everything seemed in perfect working condition. On board were 216 passengers from nearly 30 nationalities, including French, Brazilian, and German citizens. The passengers were a mix of business travelers and those on holiday. Because the Rio to Paris route exceeded the 10-hour limit before pilots are required to take a break, Flight 447 was crewed by 3 pilots. The captain was 58-year-old Marc Dubois with almost 11,000 flying hours, over 6,000 of them as captain. The co-pilots were 37-year-old David Robert with 4,500 hours on the Airbus A330 and 32-year-old Pierre-Cedric Bonin with 87 hours on this aircraft type. At 8:30 p.m. The Airbus took off, and everything seemed normal. At 20,000 feet, the relief first officer left the cockpit to rest, while the captain and first officer continued the climb. The aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and the first few hours were routine. By 1:35 a.m., Flight 447 had entered oceanic airspace, flying northeast of the South American coast over the Atlantic Ocean. This region, known for thunderstorms, is particularly tricky to navigate due to unpredictable weather. The crew discussed climbing to a higher altitude to avoid the turbulence, but warm air made this impossible. As they prepared for possible turbulence, the relief first officer returned to the cockpit at 2 a.m., and the captain took his rest without giving a full briefing. The first officer now had control of the aircraft. A few minutes later, the plane encountered moderate turbulence and turned left to avoid the worst of the weather. Then, things took a dark turn. As ice crystals struck the fuselage, the aircraft's pitot tubes, which measure airspeed, began to freeze. This caused the airspeed readings to drop drastically, triggering a chain reaction of system failures. The autopilot disconnected, and many of the aircraft's safety protections were disabled, leaving the pilots with less support to control the plane. "I've got the controls," said the first officer as the aircraft rolled right. He manually took over but struggled to stabilize the plane. With the autopilot disengaged, the pitch of the aircraft increased, and the plane began to climb unnaturally fast, leading to a danger stall warning. Despite multiple alarms and warnings, the first officer continued to pull the nose up, a fatal mistake during a stall. As the aircraft continued to climb, reaching an altitude of 38,000 feet, control became even more erratic. The first officer tried desperately to stabilize the plane, but the situation spiraled further out of control. The captain returned to the cockpit 2 minutes after the autopilot disengaged, but by then, it was too late. The airspeed had dropped to critical levels, and the aircraft was descending rapidly. Confusion gripped the cockpit as all 3 pilots struggled to regain control. "I don't have control of the aircraft," they cried out as the plane plummeted. In just 3 minutes and 30 seconds, the aircraft fell from 38,000 feet to sea level. Tragically, all 228 passengers and crew on board lost their lives, making it one of the most catastrophic events in aviation history. Following the crash, the wreckage of Flight 447 wasn't found for 2 years. In 2011, at a depth of nearly 4,000 meters, the black boxes were finally recovered. The investigation revealed that a temporary blockage of the pitot tubes by ice crystals led to the autopilot disconnecting. Without autopilot support, the pilots were unable to react properly to the situation, and the aircraft entered a sustained stall from which they never recovered. This accident led to major changes in aviation safety protocols. Investigations revealed gaps in training for high-altitude stall recovery, and the incident raised the need for better procedures in handling situations where automated systems fail. The tragedy of Air France Flight 447 remains a haunting reminder of the complex, often unpredictable nature of flying. Let's take a moment to remember those lost on that fateful flight and continue to strive for safer skies. If you found this video insightful, please leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more stories like this.